Good evening and good morning, everybody. Uh,
Hello.
just FYI that I have moved to recording it. That way I can share with Bartek. Does anybody have any issues? I don't think we have any content that requires us to be private. Is everybody okay if I just post it publicly? Okay. Good deal. All right. Because of that, you'll see me share my screen, though hopefully everybody has the agenda. But otherwise, for people who watch us on replay, won't necessarily be able to follow us closely. Dahlia, you have the first one on the list.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start us off. So I believe I raised this topic before, although without concrete examples. I think we really have a need to get our technical leadership together. I know that there are front-end dedicated weekly check-ins, there are back-end dedicated weekly check-ins, but what we're seeing here is cross department, if you will, collaboration on a technical level that we need to optimize for. So in this case, we have somewhat of an of a siloed culture here at GitLab, and I would love to see that change. Not because we're doing bad, like this is actually really comfortable place for development, but it does isolate us from how our code is running in production or what issues our infrastructure team is having to battle to keep GitLab.com up and running. So I just wanted to highlight this with more light on leadership across engineering, product, and the SRE teams especially, so that we can have those conversations around challenges and we're not trying to solve problems in isolation, and get your thoughts on it.
Dalia, is that more of an ownership thing? Because I heard the same thing from my distribution manager that the database issues, we used to have a team, but now there isn't a clear ownership. So that's always question who will be working on the database issues. I'm wondering if there's a kind of an ownership issue, and I have some thoughts about that. Maybe another option is to clarify the ownership. I'm willing to dedicate, a team like distribution to take over, because that team looks like it's doing the integration stuff, but we need to hire some knowledge expertise into that team because that team right now doesn't have the expertise.
Right. We do have a database team, I believe. So it like database is just one of the examples that is coming up lately, but we are going to continue to have these conversations. And I think what's missing here is that we don't have that distinct connection. Whereas if you think of sometimes in other companies, developers are on call for their code. They are responsible for how it runs in production. They're responsible for performance of it, and so on and so forth. We benefit a lot. We have a great infrastructure team. They keep the lights on at all times, 24/7 for GitLab.com, which leaves the development team a bit less involved in the day-to-day running of their code. So that's what I'm trying to highlight, is that our problems are growing, our teams are growing, and we really probably need to come up with a good way to sync amongst the different departments. So I'm proposing, a leadership touch point, and leadership in here does not have to be management. I actually think the leadership that we need is the technical folks who would like to be involved in these conversations, but a weekly or a bi-weekly cadence so that we have a good checkpoint on these issues or these topics, and everyone can contribute if they feel so inclined. But the lack of awareness is hurting us right now.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Tim, you have a comment in there. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the now I understand the topic a little bit. Do you mean really with in between dev, or do you mean between dev departments or dev teams with database infrastructure, etc.?
Yeah, it's development, infrastructure, and then of course product, because some of these things need to be prioritized. And actually in the product meeting, there was an interesting conversation about internal stakeholders and how we can better prioritize from there. So like it all connects, but what this would be focused on is really the key initiatives, the things that are really hurting us, both financially running GitLab.com or performance-wise or whatever else it translates to.
And what I have experienced, especially in the last 2 months, was running into problems because GitLab.com runs differently as all other instances with HA in place, and we found issues with non-stickiness, etc., etc. Perhaps also it makes perhaps only just sense to have a call with those specific teams and really target those specific topics, so that we have like a bi-weekly or 4-weekly call with infrastructure that some people in engineering are the leads on carrying their information back and forth. I think that could be something. And we have specific topics that actually a director picks them up and tries to drive them forward with one of their teams, as I did now with the GraphQL stuff, or trying to do the same with Elasticsearch, of connecting the dots, which is sometimes not that easy, between infrastructure and the engineering team, and perhaps finding some financial support, etc., etc. And that we simply have dedicated teams that pick that up. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I like that, Tim, because like another example is, Marin's issue for master going into red. That shouldn't, like, we really need to get to a workable plan and solution and iterate on it. And it's taken too long to, get to a decision on something. So these are the types of things that really improve the quality of life for our engineers, and we really need to focus on it.
Yeah, I echo what Tim said. I think there was something similar in my past job. So we probably need a POC, point of contact, to drive this forum and set up this forum like weekly or bi-weekly to sync up what's the major challenges and then coordinate the efforts. And this POC will be driving that talk.
Cool. So I think we're all in agreement. We need this. It feels like an MR would be the best way to get this rolling. Somewhere in the handbook. Does anybody want to volunteer?
I can do that. But,
you want to take a shot, Chen? Okay, I'll help you.
Yeah, I can take. I'll take a shot. Delia, I'll ping you and Tim, of course, add more detail there.
Yep, happy to help.
Yeah.
And if you hadn't taken a Chen, I would have taken it. I was counting down to 3, 2, 1.
You hit 1-1.
So, but thanks for taking an initial crack. Cool. Go ahead, Dolly.
Yeah, thank you. So my next point, I just wanted to raise this flag. This is something that we saw with backend way back when our compensation was an issue in hiring. And lesson learned is that, we saw some indication of this, but we took too long to act. So I don't want to do that again. So I'm raising the flag. These are some of the numbers that Eva, I believe, was able to gather from our front end. So we're losing 4 out of 11 offers so far due to compensation. That's quite a high percentage. So just looking at our projection and what we'd like to hire. We are also starting to bump into some of the issues due to the move to safeguard with compensation in certain areas. So that's also impacting hiring in diverse, globally diverse markets as well. So I just want to put this out there. The solution that I would say would love to see is for us to come back to the benchmark and evaluate it. We obviously have data that our compensation is not comparable for this benchmark, but I know we've explored this avenue and haven't really been able to change it. So just curious what other thoughts you would like to pursue before this becomes another major hiring bottleneck.
Do you know over which time period that was, and especially could we get links to those candidates from Eva?
Yes,
because as I interviewed all the candidates, I think I might know. I know that we had, especially in the Ukraine, a problem over the last weeks, where we hit simply that there is this problem with safeguard, and they have a very focused on small companies and ownership companies. And if you go into the actual being employed, then your taxes raise through the roof, and there our calculator is not picking up. I think there is also an issue to change or take a look at least at Ukraine. And for the others, I'm not sure which persons are meant with that. It could be that we also, because we lost one who said that he will stay with Facebook, and one who said he will pick up an offer from Google. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure, Tim. So Sean, to your point, a couple of data points. I believe these are recent offers. We've had at least one instance where the change to safeguard happened in the middle of the interview process. So the person did look at the calculator. They were comfortable with the previous range. Okay. By the time we were able to extend them an offer, the offer was much less than what they expected because of our move to safeguard. So that obviously was a huge pay cut that they could not necessarily afford. The other thing we're seeing is due to leveling. So candidates may apply thinking they are at the senior level. We assess them and feel that they are great candidates, but we believe they're more of an intermediate. So our offer then becomes less than what they expected, even though they did look at the compensation calculator in this case. I know this is a challenging issue. I mean, we've done quite a bit of this up and down with the back end benchmark. I am just concerned that due to this limitation, we may be, one, limited to hiring in certain areas, and second, to only a specific leveling, which is not an ideal place. We have a good pipeline. We should optimize for getting the best candidates from there.
Yeah, can you get me the names, locations, grades, and positions? Because that'll help sure. That discussion for me to push it forward and see if I can get some either clarification or resolution on it over those. Because, like, as an example, if there's some locality that we can't, we're just not expecting that we're going to be competitive. We have a choice to make: either remain non-competitive and then we choose not to hire from that location, or adjust it accordingly, right? So that's where I need to make sure I got the data crisp in my head to try to push on it from that perspective. And it's in my discussion with Eric this afternoon, but no proposal around it yet because I need that data to kind of figure out what proposal I want to push forward. Does that make sense?
It should be, hopefully it should be pretty easy. Eva, I believe, has a spreadsheet, so I'll have her send that over to you. All right, passing it on to Chun.
Yes, I have two things about both of hiring thing. So sourcing of the candidates, my question is, specifically, I discovered this for the memory team that our job description is very generic. I learned that we turned into this generic approach and building the pool with good reasons. But it looks like to me that we are not attracting the right candidates with the right skills we need for memory team. And also, I'm guessing that when the ecosystem team is starts to hire, we may look for different skill sets or additional skill sets other than the generic backend engineers. So I wonder if, for my education, I wonder if it makes sense to develop the dedicated job descriptions and with the levels that we are targeting, like intermediate or senior. So that we target the right specific pools of talents. I don't know if they make sense or not. I mean, just trying to understand why we converted to this generic pool.
I can give you a little bit of history and insight. So the thing with the specific ones was that especially even now it's getting more and more complex for candidates to read actually what the teams are doing. So a lot of people simply applied at the first one. So I would get all the candidates because C is great and there you go. And we see that still a lot with the front end and also some manager positions where people simply fill out something that something is there and then ask them in the interview and they're like, yeah, I put something in there because sometimes they even misunderstand that create means creating new features and manage means managing features, etc., which is always a bad sign that they didn't read too much. But on the other hand, it is a lot in the handbook to take. Also, it's much more complex to manage if you get suddenly a lot of candidates over here, but none at all in other teams, than to actually start managing them into the other pool rather than going at the beginning from a pool into the specific lanes, based on our priority lines. And what we have seen, we have done this in the front end for I think 4 weeks, and it was complete chaos because the people also started, of course, applying multiple times. So and when they applied multiple times, they added a different name and a different email address. So sometimes we had people with 3 duplicates and 2 duplicates, and yeah, and then it got completely out of hand. You had no idea if 50 people applied or 120. That was really a chaos there. That's why we went to the pooling. What I would suggest is really that if you have something super specific and super exciting with very specific skill set, try it out for the memory team, for example. For the general product features team, I would say the pool so far, we had the best experience with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we did have the pool. We stopped the pool and created a ton of vacancies on the back end, and that had a huge impact. It slowed us down completely, created a lot of chaos, and we got back to the pool for efficiency. So the pool's been working for the general skill set of hiring Rails developers with or without Go experience, but we try to highlight that we are open to both. And then anything specific, it would also, to add to what Tim said, you can also work with our sourcers, and they will try to fill the pipeline with that specific skill set that's been really successful for us on the configured, the backend roles, because we needed, Kubernetes and Docker experience, and we wanted to prioritize those candidates. So that's another way we can optimize from the pool as well.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay. Thank you very much for my education. So probably for those specific teams like memory, I will start with the sourcer to ask for specific skills that the sourcer can help us. Yeah, cool. The next one is still about recruiting. I discovered that when we reached out to some candidates on websites, job websites, a lot of them don't come with a resume, and it's really hard to understand the person by reading their LinkedIn profile. Most of the time it's very lean, not much information there. So I wonder if it makes sense to suggest a recruiting team that always asks for a latest copy of resume, even we reach out to the candidates ourselves. Without a resume, to me, I find it difficult to do the interview because I don't know the candidate too much.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, sometimes it depends, especially as I had some candidates that we sourced and they were like, we are simply trying to get a little bit in contact with them. So we are trying to not overdo it with work on their side and get them rather first interested and take it from there. So we started with the LinkedIn. But I think this is a good suggestion, especially for the Friday back-end connecting call that we have in a bi-weekly rhythm. I think you should be also invited to it.
Yeah, thank you. And also, by the way, in my past jobs, we always ask for the copy, so it's not something too much overhead to the candidates, I believe, and also we're not destroying any regulation or law.
So is the best way for someone to talk to Steve?
Yeah, I will talk to Steve. I will take the lead because I proposed this.
Cool. So I got the next one. Before there was all these in between. Speaking of this one issue, there's basically 106, which is basically around our gate not being stable. It's been a really good discussion around, is it like there was competing beliefs about this. One was that people were all committing at the same time, and there wasn't enough basically testing behind that, which I think, Tim, you talk about there with the rough pipelines, that should effectively fix that issue. We're kind of waiting on that. I think we're roughly 4 weeks out still on that from a release basically till when it's potentially usable. And Darby wants to make sure we dog food it correctly. But then the latest updates on that is it looks like there's some stability issues with the testing in regards to the fact of, like a DB failure or those kinds of things. There's a lot of times where issues are kind of coming up. And I was just trying to understand in my head, where that falls from a responsibility perspective of, does that fall to development? Does it fall to infrastructure? Does it fall to a specific team within development? How do we think about that problem? So I was trying to figure out if, we had a strong opinion about it from that perspective. And then
I think it depends on the problem, right? Because I think there's a bunch of problems that are related to flaky tests, and those are like probably on the responsibility of whoever wrote those tests. But then there are infrastructure issues. There are CI related things that are weird, and I think the Verify team needs to look at some of these things and try to figure out if there's a solution there. Occasionally it's a GitLab.com issue, and then obviously the GitLab.com team needs to be handling them. So I mean, it kind of spreads across different teams, and obviously development can be very focused on the things that they can control. But then when you get to these random, like this CI runner just spontaneously failed because its core OS updated, we have to fix that at the runner level, or so I think we have to kind of break each problem apart and kind of group them, categorize them, and say, hey, this team focuses on this team focuses on this, and that, because it's not just going to be one team.
Gotcha. Is it Marin's team responsibility to diagnose that, to figure out which teams?
It might help to have someone driving, like, this is a problem, but it might just be, here's a failure, this team go look at it, and they can always pass it to somebody else if they don't, they know what it is. But someone's got to start with this initial triage. And I think the team generally does okay job on things that are consistently breaking. I think it's the ones that are transient are the ones that people are less inclined to continue to dig into, because you hit the retry button and it passes the next time, right? And so there isn't great incentive to kind of figure out, spend the next hour or a couple of hours figuring out, was that really a transient problem, or is that something fundamentally wrong with our infrastructure? I think data here is useful. It's just that I think we're going to have to kind of divide and conquer here.
For the ones that you retry and it works, so like the ones that do take up maybe a little harder to identify where the cause is, we could possibly reach out to Meg's team and see if they have bandwidth to help with some of that. If we feel that it's cross-cutting, if we can identify the area, it would be good for that team to pick it up, even if it is a flaky test that happens to run most of the time. But that would be an investment worth it, because I think desensitizing to failures in our test suite is not the culture we want to build out.
No, I don't think so. I think it's just that there's so many of these things that happen, and it could take hours. I've spent hours in the past trying to fix a transient problem, and it could take me 20 hours, to be honest, sometimes to fix it. And so, there's the balance between going deep into the deep end or just kind of moving on. It's a kind of a tricky thing. But Meg's team is good. They will not have some of the insights into some of these tests. So I still think it's best if the team or the person who wrote the test can take the initial look at it and kind of say, I actually don't think this is a problem with the test. It's actually a problem with the underlying infrastructure.
Yeah, I like
so
that.
many tests in there that you throw it at Meg's team. Meg's team's going to say, I don't know. I'm going to ask this person.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Is it pretty easy to identify, I assume? Especially the newer tests I assume are easy, but like from
older tests, I just look at who last touched it, and
okay,
that be the starting point.
Yeah.
And just say, hey, you last touched this. Could you take a look at it? And people are generally happy to help. They just have to be asked specifically to take a look.
Right.
This is volunteering through Git blame.
Exactly. I hate to say I do it all the time. I just, I want to find one person. I just do the Git blame.
I'm actually okay with that strategy, because then they can always say, well, actually, I'm not I changed that line, but here's actually the real person you should talk to around it. So is the idea that Meg's team would still do initial triage just to figure out who, or would it be or do we think that's like I think
it's a little bit hard on their team because they're already doing a lot of different things. I would like to just say, hey, get individual issues and just start doing hey, this test belongs, this last touches person, just assign that person directly and just, do something where it's just kind of like it's very proactive and it's specific, ask people specific to drill into issues. So I don't know. Maybe it's maybe, I think people are good at monitoring the development channel and seeing a test failure and then trying to create an issue or something around it. But I think, someone's got to at least kind of round up and do assessment of like where are all these failures coming. I think Remy had a good note in there. You know, he's just talked to specific jobs, but maybe I don't know, somebody should be assigning people and just say, hey, look, it could be the delivery, it could be the last development person who spotted this, somebody. I don't know the best way to assign it. I think it's hard to just say, quality team, you guys take it. But maybe that's the first step we do.
Okay, well, Marin opened the issue, and he's the one who's most passionate about it. By the way, I'm also passionate about this, and this is always every development organization I've been in, this is the classic problem we run into, which is you create a really good test infrastructure until until it starts breaking randomly. So I'll talk to Marin about it. Maybe he's the first. Like my intuition was to say, let's ask Marin from that perspective.
Maybe there's something automated we can do. Every time you get a failure,
but
it has to be tied to an issue, then it gets assigned to somebody, and then we kind of automatically try to farm out this stuff. But yeah, maybe Marin could drive the initial.
Yeah, let me talk to him about it just to make sure, because like one thing I want to make sure is that we're like, to your point, we initially treated Ajit and then we assigned it to a team, and then the real issue is just making sure it gets focused, right? So not necessarily in code commit week, or code complete week, but that it doesn't also we don't waste months before we potentially do it. So okay, cool. Thanks for that feedback, everybody. One other, this is more an FYI. I'm working on a retro change where I'd like to go into the retro discussion with action items kind of being defined. So it's currently a work in progress. If you have early feedback, please give it to me. The biggest challenge I've got is that you actually have to change the retro instructions are split across two different sections. One in the retro summary and then another one in the actual retro section for managers. So I'm trying to make sure that splits accordingly. But kind of the big thing is we usually come to that discussion. Previously, we were coming to the discussion with everything, and then we were supposed to kind of summarize in a half an hour's time. There's just no way for us to do that. So I want to just move to let's get action items in place. And speaking of that, if folks have action items open from previous retros, please talk to them about them and see if we can potentially get some focus there. Because in theory, those are the most important things that we need to change to make ourselves more efficient. Cool. Tim, you got the next one?
Yeah, I will try to make that fast. So I got a request from Mike Lewis about dedicated docs engineers. So in the past, this was also with the front-end team. I mainly dedicated it to the configure front-end team, as it was at the beginning with the create team, but the configure team had way more time. So I know that Chuck Erasmus especially did a lot of things. As this is now in your area, Dalia, I would say you picked it up. Are you happy with staying it with the configure team? Do we want to suggest that you get dedicated people? I'm not sure if it's really enough work for dedicated engineers or if we find something in between.
Okay. No, I'll take a look, Tim. Thanks for the ping. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I'm happy to help. So let me just dig in and see what the ask is. I appreciate that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then coming to the bigger topic there, as I got so many pings as I never got before around lending people and having engineers on different topics. So I have right now someone on site with one of the HackerOne, then we have memory jumpstart, growth jumpstart, and the docs engineer. So that were just 4 requests in 3 weeks. So my main question is, how many do we expect more of those things of moving people around temporarily? Because then it's much easier to plan and say, okay, if that is really the last request for the next 3 months, then I'm happy to lend another one. But if I'm landing one and then getting another request, then I'm also getting thinner and thinner everywhere. So
yeah, I share the same sentiment. We also have one for secure as well, another global optimization. So similarly, I think the painness is more felt, especially on the teams where there's only 4 engineers and a lot of them are new. Yeah, I'm wrestling with it, not because I don't think we should help. I think this is great. It's more, are we really optimizing here? Because we have new engineers who are going to need to onboard, which in a lot of times takes at least a release for them to get up to speed. And then that team is impacted. We have hiring in the mix, and so on and so forth. I get that it's not an easy problem, but I just want to make sure we're also not creating long-term issues by, you know, understaffing teams from initiatives, and then they're also in a bad place to deliver when it comes to their commitments. But it's fully understandable. Like I get it. I will share this. One of the things that I found to be successful, and I did that within the ops teams, even with limited number of developers, was to seed initiatives within a particular team. So the way we used to have CI/CD, we didn't have a configure team. We started talking about auto DevOps. That work started to be done by the CI/CD backend team. And then as we grew in momentum, we took a couple of engineers that worked on the initiatives and seeded the new configure team, and had, you know, Dylan step into the manager role and grow it. We are doing similar with package. So package is another team with no manager, no engineers. And this has been another way so that within the release team, we're able to do the work and people are not feeling isolated or on an island working by themselves on, you know, initiatives they didn't necessarily start off with. So I just, you know, sharing a little bit as an option.
Okay, we're past time. I haven't talked to Eric about it from where decisions are made. I'll ask him if he has any feedback about visibility and, you know, how we think about this kind of longer term, because I think it's a new process we put in place effectively, right? And we've used it aggressively, which is great for a short period of time. But then to your points, we need to also be able to use it more judiciously, or at least be in a space to kind of talk about it from that perspective. Cool. And the last thing I had on the list is if you have any notes around using contribute team time, this is a last minute addition, please let me know. I currently don't have any plans, but I'm not sure if it makes what makes best sense. So if you have any notes, please add them to the minutes, and I'll look at them in the next day or so. All right. Thanks for everybody's time.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Have a great day.